Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. Maybe we should just close the door. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here. My name is Ruth Mackenzie, and I'm the Director of Arts for the British Council, with a responsibility for leading the arts programme globally for the British Council, who have 100 offices around the world and work in 200 countries around the world. We were founded in 1934, a time not unlike this time, a time of many challenges for many countries around the world. And now our mission, harking back to 1934, is to contribute to peace and prosperity for the world. So it is a great honour for us to be here at Mondiacult, where we feel very well aligned with those aims. One of the recent achievements of the British Council was to commission a report exactly along the themes of Mondiacult, to say that culture was a missing pillar for the world's priorities for sustainability. The priorities, as you know, are economic, social, environmental, but the missing pillar was a report that argued that they should also have culture as a fourth missing pillar. And this is, of course, a big theme for all of us here this week. And I'm going to now hand over to Tiffaine, my colleague, and each of these colleagues will introduce themselves very briefly, because this morning I noticed that the person in my position spent much too long introducing all the panelists, who then all wanted to introduce themselves. So Tiffaine, I hand over to you to talk about the follow-up to the missing pillar, or at least the point of inspiration that the missing pillar invited you to carry on with in writing a report, the findings of which you're going to share with us now.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you to all our guests to be here today. So, if I'm here today, my name is Tiffaine de Montbin. I am both here as a director of the Metis Fund, which is located within the French Development Agency, and it is also at the co-founder and the co-lead of the coalition Art and Culture for Development that was launched within the Finance in Common Summit. And I can see Malini just here. She's also the co-lead from the Caribbean Bank. For you maybe to better understand what is Finance in Common, it is quite a huge network with more than 500 financial institutions, so public banks of development. And 2 years ago, we launched within this network a coalition about art and culture. And I think it's quite important because here we are all together. I mean, we all know about the role of culture, but when you go into financial public institution, or I'm sure even within private institution, it's not the case, you know. People, they won't speak a lot about culture. So it's good to be here with all of you. We are part of the same family. So this coalition is, we are now 10 banks being part of this coalition, and we also have some members, experts like the British Council or UNESCO. And when we decided to launch this coalition, we first wanted to better understanding what we are doing as public banks, because to be very honest, we didn't know who was doing what regarding arts and culture. So what are doing the public banks for development? What are they doing, why, and how? So I'd like maybe to present some of the results of this study, because it was really the first one about this topic. And I think that it's quite enlightening to share with you some of the results and to feed also our discussion. So first of all, why is it relevant for a public bank of development to support art and culture? So we first started the study by doing a very intensive interdisciplinary literature review. And all of you, I'm sure you are very aware of all of this. But again, for the Public Bank of Development, it's not that easy. So we really wanted to have a tool to explain why art and culture are so connected to their mandate. And here is the result of the study. And it is really a follow-up of the missing pillar study from the British Council. But it's like a compass, you know, for the banks, but maybe also for other institutions. What are we doing? Where do we situate our action? And so maybe the first one is that for sure, why do we need to support art and culture? It's because of the economic benefits that these different sectors have for the society. But it is also for the benefits, well, maybe just as an example, creative and cultural industries contribute 3.1% of global GDP, so it's about 2.3 trillion US dollar, and it employs more than 30 million people worldwide. Second pillar, it is because for sure culture and arts directly benefit for individuals. And so it's all about arts and culture playing a role in enhancing human well-being, fostering social inclusion. Well, arts and culture, we all know that they contribute to education, to personal growth, allowing experiential learning and critical thinking. So it's also about art and culture stimulating creativity individually and innovation, enhancing problem solving and adaptability across various economic sectors. And the third pillar, is culture and arts benefits for communities and society. So it's about arts and culture playing a vital role in fostering social cohesion, intercultural dialogue, and collective identity. So as a universal language, art bridges diverse communities, facilitating mutual understanding and cooperation. UNESCO has, for an example, highlighted its role in reducing ethnic tensions and discrimination, while artistic projects in post-conflict regions have contributed to reconciliation. So these three pillars, as you can imagine, they are all interdependent. So you can't imagine one of them being active if the two others are not. And it is something that, you know, public banks, and I will be very happy to hear my colleagues about it, but it's not something which is easy to defend when you are within a financial institution working on all society issues. When you speak about culture, you have colleagues speaking about energy, agriculture, urban development, education, and so they are the only ones speaking about culture. And this kind of compass is really for them to be aware that there are various ways of contributing to their mandate through arts and culture. So what are they doing? I mean, if the why is yes, they need to do something. What are they doing? How do they engage today in cultural and arts? So just for you to know that we are around 533 members within these networks of public banks. And after a very huge study, and it was not easy because it was the first time that we were trying to get data about the activity of public banks, we found only 50 banks being active in this area, which is, well, it was a surprise because we didn't know about it. We didn't know if it was going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 100. Well, we knew that it wouldn't be 100 of banks, but 50 was already quite a good number. And 7 of them are already members of the coalition. So how do they engage in culture and arts? So we found that they are financing 8 categories of projects. So I'm going to go through them, but very quickly. So the first one is supporting the creative and cultural economy. The second one is cultural heritage preservation. The third one is artistic creation and support for artists. And it's quite interesting to go through this one because it's already showing you the kind of philosophy of these institutional financial banks. The fourth one is expanding access to culture. About 40% of PDBs are working on that. Knowledge, production and research. 20% of the public development banks are working on this. Public advocacy and regulatory support, the sixth one. 7, support for amateur artistic practices. About 15% of the PDBs are working on that. And 15% of PDBs provide some sponsorship to cultural events. So main of their support is going to the creative industry, cultural and creative industries. And then, so that's what they are doing, but how? I mean, with what kind of financial tools are they supporting this? We can, okay, so, okay, well, this is another one. It's just for you to understand about the compass. So we decided to situate the activities that they are doing. And as I just told, you can see that it's mainly on the economic benefits of arts that they are trying to support arts and culture, but usually with a transversal vision of the role of arts and culture. And we will discuss after the underrepresented areas. Regarding the financial tool, it was also very interesting to see that they are using all these banks are using all the kind of financial tool that they have, ranging from well, loans, guarantees, equity investment, grants, alongside non-financial assistance to enhance business resilience. This report is online, so you can find it quite easily. Non-reimbursable public fund is also essential for artistic creation, amateur practices, and cultural events. And at the end, so it was also very good to see that they are really trying to use all their tools. And then this study didn't allow us to compare the financial flow, well, to compare the banks between each other. But we just got some orders of magnitude about their different tools. For an example, ranging from 10 million to 800 million US dollar if you consider the sovereign loans, and ranging from 2,000 US dollar to 20 million US dollar for the grants. So as a conclusion, our report really highlights the growing recognition of arts and culture as essential pillars of sustainable development. But while PDBs try to increasingly support creative industries and heritage preservation, challenges really remain. The focus on economic impact often overshadows the social benefits of culture, such as its roles in health, well-being, and environmental advocacy, for an example. So to maximize impacts, PDBs will have to adopt different strategies, expanding non-commercial financing, which is not easy, integrating culture into broader development frameworks, and strengthening partnerships between themselves and also with private actors. And it's also why we are here today. So thank you for your attention, and Russ, I give you the floor back.
So we have a fantastic panel here that offers a range of expertise and wisdom from both the private sector, the commercial interest that you were just discussing, and also the public sector. And I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves very briefly, but also I'm going to give you each a provocation, which is, can you, as you introduce yourself, just finish by saying what you think in the area of arts and culture today in the world is the most urgent priority for funds? Because we will find ourselves talking about choices and priorities as we go through. So you have one thing you can propose as being the top of the list for the funding crisis that the world of arts and culture faces. And I'm going to ask, with great pleasure, to Risi, the Minister of Culture from Kenya, who I had the great honor of meeting in Kenya, and it's such a joy to have you here today.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be here today. I'd like to thank the organizers for this amazing opportunity. My name is Umi Bashir. I am the Principal Secretary for the State Department of Culture, the Arts and Heritage under the Ministry of Gender, Culture and Children's Services in Kenya. Thank you so much for this critical question, and I'm very happy to see you once again. While there are many areas that need support when it comes to arts and culture and also heritage, we have decided to identify a few areas which would apply to this, that are quite underfunded and need support. The first one is research and data. Research, cultural research and data analysis is quite underfunded chronically. So without having robust data, it usually becomes very difficult to have a definitive sort of quantified projection of the contribution of culture and arts to the GDP. So for us, of utmost priority, I would say, is to have research and data made as a priority, especially for Kenya, where there is vast and so much content, creative content across. So the government's job is not to make business or to be in business, but to be an enabler, a primary enabler, right? And that is the role of the government, so that business can be conducted and there's a conducive environment for business to be conducted. The second area I would talk of as a priority, and that is quite underfunded, is the area of monetization and protection of our cultural intellectual property. We have so much of this across the globe and Kenya. We have our traditional knowledge, and it's neither protected or monetized. From the Turkana Lake Basin to the Lamu UNESCO Cultural Heritage Sites, to the western parts of Kenya, to Mandera and Nairobi, you will find that there's a vast, vast reservoir of cultural intellectual property that is not safeguarded and that is not protected at all. Under our constitution, Article 11, the management and also probably I can say the Article 11 mandates and emphasizes that cultural property and cultural assets should be protected, and also money should be put in the pockets of the youth and the creative industry. I mean, that's the whole point, right? To make ends meet. So we need to protect and also monetize this particular sector. The third and major one is a gap that is there when it comes to culture and climate change. Climate change is causing a lot of stress, especially in the coastal part of Kenya, where we have the Indian Ocean, we have a lot of heritage sites at the coastal part of the country. We have the Vasco da Gama in Malindi, we have Fort Jesus in Mombasa, and we have what we call the Kaya Forest in the whole of the coast, from Kwale to Kilifi. So safeguarding these heritage sites is of utmost importance, because climate change is real, and the stress that the weather is causing to the sites makes the sites to be dilapidated, rusty, because of the crystallization of the Indian Ocean. So I can say that's also another priority. And the fourth, as I come to a close, is investment in capital, human capital. Human capital is very important. And it is time that we also take our youth and children to be an integral part of the human capital we are talking about. CBC is a curriculum-based initiative that we have under the education ministry in our country, whereby we are using our children and our youth to bring out the creative part, the talent, the art that we have in our children. And the arts, sports, and also creative industry builds the talent that we are talking about. So that is an area that I could say is quite underfunded. And arts and culture, although they are passion-driven, it should be a source of income for the generation, the younger generations, and for the youth. So in Kenya, we have what we say pesa mfukoni, meaning money in their pockets. So as someone at the bottom of the pyramid, we want to put money in your pockets so that you make a livelihood. And the creative industry is the best way to go. Thank you very much.
Now, I forgive you for having 4 brilliant priority points, and they are brilliant, and we will be coming back to them. They are all fundamental to our discussion, but I'm going to ask the other panelists only to have 1 priority point that needs funding, if you can bear it.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Rafael Chueca. I am the Associate General Manager of La Caixa Foundation for Culture and Regional Action. La Caixa Foundation is a private philanthropic institution in Spain, and we operate in 3 main areas: social areas, research, and cultural areas. And we operate mainly in Spain and Portugal. So I'm sorry, but I will talk mainly about Spain and Portugal. And for me, if I try to adjust to this compass, I would say the main priority is everything but the economic benefits of culture and arts. There's a part that you have included in community benefits, that it's heritage preservation, that maybe is not so priority because it's funded. I don't know that completely funded, but the rest, the benefits for individuals and community engagement is clearly underfunded, at least in Spain and Portugal, and I have seen in your presentation in the rest of the world too.
And that is fantastic, that that you go against the stereotype of supporting the economic. Thank you for that. I'm going to go on.
I'm laughing
this way.
because it will be quick, because I completely agree. I think that it's really important to focus again on the benefits of culture and arts on human, and investing in human capital, which is not directly rentable or profitable. It's not saying that it's the only thing to do, but today I really believe that it's under-financed, and especially in the countries where we're working, definitely we need the people to be creative, proud of themselves, self-confident. We need the communities to be cohesive, and art and culture are really a big leverage to accomplish that. So economic is clearly important, but maybe the other ones are really under-supported today. I know my neighbor is going to say something else, so I can.
I will surprise you.
Please go on. Yes, surprise us.
No, I'm not going to say something else. I think it's complementary to everything you have said. Yes, of course. My name is Emil Rodriguez. I'm the Director of Urban Development at CAF, Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. And in our area is where creative economies is allocated at the bank. And we have a logic that I will explain later, but for the sake of time, I will try to be brief and concrete. But of course, my answer will be mostly focused on the scope on our area, the scope of our work, which is mainly Latin America and the Caribbean. And this region is marked by significant inequalities and employment access and high levels of informality. So if we want to talk about what is missing, rather than a sector specifically, it's about a group of people that are underrepresented in the data. I totally agree with the minister. There are no public policies that address them, and there's no way, if there's no public policies and if there's no enough public investment, you cannot attract and incentivize the private sector. So it's a whole chain that we have to overlook. Usually these jobs, informal jobs, are in the creative sectors. They are more focused on handcraft, which did not went through the digitalization process, so they are kind of left behind. And it's very important that these cultural activities, we have to focus on them in the whole chain, value chain, not only think of the sector as something isolated, because there's many people that are being left behind in different parts of the chain.
And that also is a very excellent point. We're going to go on now to examine what we feel the strengths are from the public sector point of view, what activities that are primarily for the public sector and what activities are primarily for the private sector. And so I'm going to invite you each just to respond from the sector, from your sector expertise, and then we're going to see where the holes are in the current structures and try and solve the problems. We're going to try and involve you all in the final phase of solving the problems. So please think about the solutions as we try and get from the dialectical position to a synthesis. I'm going to start in the same order, if that is all right, to say now we are examining we are now, or between us, representing the solutions to some of the problems of underfunding, the crises that we've been discussing. And what is the role in the sector that, if you like, you represent, which I guess is the government, is the public sector? What are the areas where you can help solve these problems?
Thank you for that. For us as Kenya, our solutions are more of a cross-cutting solution approach, whereby one ministry works with another ministry to deliver as a whole government approach. So we have the trade and creative economy. For instance, these two ministries, they do drive the national priority of digitizing our creative economy and envisaging and implementing what we call the BETA, the Bottom-Up Economic Transformation Agenda. And I repeat this because this is the main mandate of the national government in Kenya, whereby of utmost priority is the people at the bottom of the pyramid. And when we say this, we don't leave out the creatives, we don't leave out the artists, and we do not leave out our cultural heritage, the intangible and also the tangible. So probably a final one would be a critical of aching priority, I can say, for us now is capacity building. Capacity building for our youth to understand, and also capacity building for to transition from donor dependency to what we call the private sector capital. So this is also quite a priority for us. So we actively work to help our cultural businesses formalize and also making them recognizable and sustainable investment vehicles for banks and also private equity. So thank you very much for that. I give it back to you.
This cues you well.
Okay. So talking about our area, I think that we are fortunate to be in an area with a big cultural heritage, a big cultural activity, but this sometimes this is part of our problem. Public sector and even private sector has to allocate a lot of money for this cultural heritage. We have museums, we have all kind of infrastructures to keep open and with programs and alive. So public sector, in Spain at least, dedicates a lot of their budget to the public infrastructures. So, and there's no question about that. There's no question about that, and it hasn't got to be a question. We need Prado Museum open. But the part of the culture that it's not so visible, like the what we are talking about, individual and community engagement, and all these things are always the last thing to fund, and public sector tends to forget them. And in private sector, that is my sector, we have to divide between philanthropy and corporate sponsorships. In philanthropy, it depends on the institution and the founder of the foundation that we can support other activities, but corporate sponsorships, sorry about my English, tend to fund the same things that public sector. Museums, exhibitions, festivals, all these kind of things that have an output in prestige or visibility. So I think that we have to give steps to fund these community engagement activities. Artists, small institutions that are not so well funded because the rest of the activities take all the money. And as a practitioner in the private sector, I think that we have a lot to do there. Because if you are a really philanthropist, you are not looking for the
visibility and the
visibility.
benefits.
If you believe that culture is good in itself, you have to put money in culture, even if you are not so recognized. At least is what we're thinking in our institution. Maybe later we will develop.
That's a very good point between the, if I may say, the selfish side of sponsorship and the unselfish side of philanthropy. Thank you very much. Are you going to jump in as well? No, go. Yeah.
Perfect. From the development bank perspective, I have to clarify something first. It's like we are not private or public. We are something in between. We would like to see ourselves more as a facilitator or an articulator between public and private, but not only public and private, also the rest of the ecosystem, because there are many other actors that are sometimes left behind, like communities, like many other actors that we have to take into account, and we would like to think of ourselves as facilitators. So regarding your question and what the private sector is financing more actively, we think in Latin America at least that some sectors with clear business models like audiovisuals or video games, which have a very structured logic, are with more professionalized sectors with very strong unions. They have been the first to incorporate in digitalization. So they have survived through all the changes. And they can actually make pressure for regulations in the public sector. So they're very strong. While other sectors that still remain analog, they have this problem to insert themselves into this whole ecosystem. So, but from an urbanist perspective, we think at the bank that it's very important when investments occur directly with impact in the territory. In that sense, and I totally agree with what you said about AFD, like sometimes governments are way too focused on building, the infrastructure. There's always money for infrastructure, but not for the rest of the things that makes life, that bring lives to the infrastructure, like management, for example. So what we do is like we try to meet both worlds through a project. Like we usually finance infrastructure for culture that has an impact in the territory, and this is one of the main parts of our strategy in creative economies. It's like infrastructure has to come along with other things that are important to make an impact in the territory, like soft I don't know, the sectors, activities, capacity building programs, managing skills. Those kind of things are really important, and we would like to create a balance between this ecosystem through our loans.
So what is very beautiful is that actually we have a remarkably good synthesis between you all and the sides you represent, and that there is a remarkable consistency that the priorities are, you express it in slightly different ways, but are those at the bottom of the pyramid, including young people, those that are in the community with the most disadvantages. So those that have the least agency or voice, and that you are all in your different ways focusing on people rather than capital infrastructure, and you're focusing on capacity building, the development of skills, which I would say is suggesting a way to empower, to give the young ones, or those with the least, the most disadvantaged, the ability to have the power to survive and thrive. So that is a remarkable model of synergy between the different points of view that you start from. If only the world was as well, as wise as you are, and as well as organized as you are. But so I want now just for us each to focus very quickly, because I want us to bring in then the audience, in how can we persuade the rest of the world to be as wise as you? What is it that we need to do to get the points of view that you are putting forward to be the way of closing the holes, the problems, the gaps between, on the whole, the private and the public sectors who are investing in societies? What is it that we can do? And my final extra question, if you wish, is in the light of the conference so far, where there has been a focus on emergencies, if you like, that go beyond, I may say, the missing pillar, are there other emergency actions that the public and private sectors that have the power to help communities need to take? That's an option. You don't have to answer it. People in the audience maybe also think. Do you want to start first this time?
Other end. Perfect. We believe maybe that the main gap between public and private sector arises from the lack of common language and a shared understanding of what's each sector do. So, but also with the rest of the ecosystem, there's a lack of understanding and there's a lack of a common language. So they don't communicate very well. The private sector often does not comprehend the speed of the risk of the market, while the private sector does not always value the social impact of culture, which is what you just said before. So to prepare both sectors, the key factor is to try to accelerate the joint forces. That's something that is very important. And we as an institution, that's what we're mandated to do, to bring together both sectors. So we have prepared at the bank a strategy that is based in 3 fundamental pillars to close this gap. This is what we're trying to do. First is the mobilization of resources for project accelerations and knowledge generations. Also to work on the gap that the minister mentioned on data that could be useful to close that gap, to create good and focused public policies. And the second pillar is financing both traditional and non-traditional instruments. That is something very important. Banks, they have to innovate, to have capillarity, to have, to reach the basis. So we need to also innovate. We have like public programs from policy designs to investment in infrastructure with soft components, as I said before. We have credit lines for creative economies with national development banks, for example, and also high impact initiatives that can be used as a pilot. And the third pillar, and I'm going to end with this one, is the promotion of partnerships. It's very important, that is very important to achieve scale. We have signed an agreement, for example, with Netflix before, and they're very focused in the social aspect of that. How can they create an capacity building programs, for example, with us for the ecosystem in different parts of the chain, in the value chain of films, for example. That is very important. It's not only the capital investment for the production, the big production, but also all the different disciplines that makes films happen. So we are really focused on that and to understand the value chain of each sector. We have to be taken into account very carefully.
That's very exciting, can I say? And I'm sure many of us will want to know a little bit more.
Well, I agree. I mean, private and public funds, they both have their own strengths and weaknesses. And so I'd like maybe to share with you two things I have in mind at the moment. The first one is regarding private funds. I am quite personally afraid to see that many of the private funds looking for profitable activities are focusing their investment on limited activities like fashion or audiovisual. So my question is, how do public fund could join private fund to be sure that all economically profitable sectors could be supported? That could be a good way for private and public funds to go together and ensure that the whole area of economic benefits of arts and culture be supported. And the second one, it's very recent that I'm having this point. It is that within the public fund, it seems that public financial institutions are not willing to spend small tickets, small financial tickets. The more and more as public funds are restricted and that the situation is quite difficult, they want to do big financial tickets, and they don't really pay attention to the small ones. And it's in the cultural area, I mean, small financial tickets, it's really important if you want to ensure that everywhere actors are still able to act. And I think that the private funds, the philanthropic funds, are much more aware of this importance. So in this one, I would say that the private funds are much more aware and in advance than the public ones. So it should be the private to push and to make some pressure on the public institution to remind that it's not only about big finances that we will save and support art and culture.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I agree with the 2 points of Tiffany. Do I say Tiffany? I have focused on individual and community engagement funds as a main priority, because the rest, I could say that sometimes operates at a common industry. You have banks that want to, and investors that want to put money in fashion or video games or something like that. So it's not a focus for philanthropic institutions, because there is covered in other ways. So for me, of course, it's important, but it's not a main need. What we are obsessed with as La Caixa Foundation is with creating networks, mixed networks, big public institutions, small public institutions, big private institutions, small artists, practitioners, every kind of practitioners. I think is the way to cover this gap, because it's very difficult for big public institutions to arrive to small artists, small or young artists working in a village in Spain or Portugal or anywhere. So we want to create these networks, for example, with public institutions, with museums, working with them, creating some content using artists that we are looking for with grants or something like that. And I would have several examples, but I don't want to take lots of time. But I will say that, for example, in our institution, last year, we had in our cultural area, we have 1,800 different institutions between individuals or British Museum, for example, the whole pack in the middle, of with financial transactions. Most of them, as we are philanthropists, paying for something that they are doing in agreement with us. We think this is the way not of creating a whole network, because to wait big public institutions, for example, states, to fund small collectives everywhere is almost impossible, because they have all this heritage, all these infrastructures, and all these industries that create employment, and everybody wants them to work properly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think your question goes to the heart of the how in our topic today. And the relationship between the public and the private finance is not just complementary, so to say. It is quite essential for sustainable development. For instance, culture should be a stand-alone sustainable development goal. And this is quite important and vital for this industry. Let's start with opportunities that we see. Kenya is quite cognizant of the fact that there is a shift in the global landscape. And we have embarked on an ambitious 5-year plan, a 5-year transition program, so to speak, to move our cultural sector from donor-funded projects to commercially viable private sector-funded enterprises. And this, within this transition, we see mechanisms that come in as game changers. For instance, PPPs. PPP can unlock a lot of major cultural infrastructural development in the industry. For instance, museums, theaters, art galleries, and something else probably would be of importance is the innovative financing model. And what is this? For instance, when we look at blended financing, this is an opportunity for the industry to shine and make ends meet. For instance, where public and philanthropic capital de-risk investments come into play, all right? Another thing is a cross-sectoral approach that can position culture as an enabler, for instance, in health, in education, in climate resilience, and so on. But we have challenges. We have to be real about this. We have challenges. And as African nations and the Global South, we have challenges. One challenge in this sector of art, creative economy, and culture is a perception problem that culture and art is not lucrative. And is this true? It's not, right? When we look at how much globally culture and the creative industry make, is around 2.3 trillion US dollars annually. That is massive. So this is an industry that is making a lot of money, and we have to invest to make sure that this comes out clearly. We have to have a mindset change. Secondly, the private finance naturally prioritizes quick and immediate high profit programs, which often sidelines critical heritage and also community-focused cultural work. As a wind-up, what is the way forward, if I may? We have to speak the same language. What we discuss is what should be implemented for all across the globe. third world countries, developed countries, developing nations. And the public sector must lead in developing clear metrics that measure both economic, social, and also governance impact in terms of culture. So we must de-risk the whole notion of this sector. That is it. And with that, I'd like to thank you, the AFD and also British Council for this amazing forum. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And we end, interestingly, with the shared language and with issues that we have been returning to all the way through. But now I'm going to ask members of the audience, yes, exactly, to stand up. And I'm afraid the microphone is hard, but I'm going to come to you quickly. No. They have one behind you. It's behind you. It's behind you. Look behind you. There we are, as they say.
Thank you very much.
English
Sorry, I'm a little
language.
bit in a hurry because I have a jump in another meeting, so I just wanted to share some of my
Will
thoughts.
you say who you are?
Yeah,
Just to
my name
help
is
us?
Wafa Belgasem, aka Tornado, but I'm from Tunisia and the founder of Culture Funding Watch. I just wanted to share some of my thoughts or maybe bring some perspective to the discussion, because contextualizing the reality and the access to finance for the CCI is very important in this conversation, but maybe it's because of the time. For instance, when you mention the current crisis to face the cut of the finance for the art, while it's maybe something new in some global north countries, this is our reality for the last 40 years, so that's nothing new for us. That's one thing. And when we talk about access to finance, I think one important thing that is also missing from the conversation, I always say it, you have to invest in your investor. So there is a lot of program, we talked about capacity building, data, etc. But there is very little programs set just to help the philanthropy sector, help the private sector, and build their capacity to coordinate with each other. And back to the ecosystem approach, I think in the absolute, by the way, I'm also a specialist in financing the art and culture, and I think the real problem, dans l'absolu, there is not a bad or a good mechanism. You mentioned it at a certain point, the bad sponsorship. It's not that true, because the private sector has different budgets, and its budget dictates where the money and what is the utility of the money. So the sponsorship comes from the communication budget of private sector, which is dedicated by visibility, guidelines, and big shows. While the CSR has another purpose from the private sector, and it functions as a development. So I think what matters really for us, and at least in the context in the Global South, is an ecosystem approach to facilitating access to finance. However, as much as it's important to work that ecosystem has diversified, all those mechanisms must exist, actually. There is not one that is bad. They have to cohabitate: sponsorship, CSR, philanthropy, private sector. But one other important thing, it's the accessibility. You can have all those mechanisms, but when they are badly designed, they become inaccessible to the cultural creative people. So accessibility is important for ecosystem. Diversity is important. Democratic access to information about who's funding what. And also, affordability is important, meaning when we talk about access to finance, it's a profession. It's my work for the last 20 years. We have basically no specialist and professional dedicated to financing the art and culture. And you cannot push the maturation of an ecosystem without having people dedicated to do that. It's not something you do punctual, you did a study. It's long-term and every day, as you mentioned it, to educate banker and investor, to work why philanthropy. For example, in the Global South, we have an issue. We don't have that many philanthropic organizations. And I just finished a study, and sometimes the barrier is not lack of the means, sometimes the legal framework. I just finished a study on philanthropy in the Northern Africa, and one of the major problems is there is no legal statute for foundation. So it doesn't really encourage philanthropists to go there because it has a lot of disadvantages. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much for those important points.
Oh, it's just, sorry, one last point. I forgot to mention that is important, sorry. Helping coordinating. We need to create space where all those ecosystem players come together. And that kind of meetings and collaboration are very scarce. Where there is one we organize, it's called the Art Philanthropists Network. And this is the purpose. It become like a peer-to-peer workshop, like 2-3 days, where they really talk about what is going on and how we coordinate. We're launching the Euromed edition with the Union de la Méditerranée.
Thank you very much. We're going to make a quick response, and then meanwhile, would someone else in the audience like to put up their hand to get a microphone? But you jump in. Just to clarify an important point, we don't hate sponsors.
I wasn't talking about bad sponsorship. In fact, I spent years of my life deciding this kind of sponsorships in a bank. And I was very happy to allocate some money in an exhibition instead of in a dinner and a party for customers. So, but the point of view is different. So this is not going to solve the lack of funds of small artists, small collectives, or small institutions, because the point of view is different. But they are not bad. They are really welcome.
Thank you for that. We have another question at the back. Do you want to stand
Yes.
up and tell us who you are?
It's Valeria Marcolin. I'm from Culture et Développement, Culture and Development, a French-based NGO. So AFA said half of the thing that we share both from our field experience. So I will try just to complete another important thing, is that first of all, I had half of my African colleagues who were willing to come here, but I couldn't because there was no translation. So we go back to the access of information, and we also see at the European Union level that some funding models now, there is a new mobility fund, for example, for Europe and Africa, and it's only published in English, and we can only apply in English. Of course, there is AI today, but I think that the cultural diversity, the diversity of language is essential, and especially financial language is a very critical one. So we have to have the possibility to have all our colleagues around the table in a continent, for example, Africa, that has at least 3 major languages, which are not even national languages original from the region, but at least with which we can interact with each other. The second one is the elephant in the room, and it's what Tiffen has just pointed out. In fact, donors are the more and more concentrating funding on big institutions that then are called to make des financements en cascade, sub-granting. First of all, these dilute the visibility on where the fund is going. It's very much related to the priority of the organizations that are the leaders of the sub-granting, so we lose the visibility on the complementarity of the objectives, and we work in silos. For example, I will not say the state, but I suppose it will recognize itself. For supporting developing projects of small organization, you have a kind of public funding. We can support your organization if your annual budget is up to 200,000 euros, then you can apply to this type of fund. And if your budget is 350,000 euros per year, then you can apply to this other fund. So there is a gap of 150,000 euros. All the NGOs who are between 200,000 and 350,000 cannot apply to any fund on cooperation for development, for example. So the mapping, the issue that Wafa was raising, is very essential to see that both public and private funding are covering the full spectrum of the creative system. And of course, the creative system is profit and not for profit, as you were saying. But when we start to say that a national policy is switching from sustaining the art sector to a profit-oriented system, and the focus is on the profit-oriented, we forget that the majority of the small artists or the small companies are working on a not-for-profit basis on community, but they are developing creative economy. Creative economy is not only about making profit, is also about making employment. So we never have to lose this focus. And therefore, the fact that the donors have a regular meeting to see that there are not missing pillars that we are covering in the ecosystem is very important. So inclusiveness, transparency, regular dialogue. I think UNESCO is a good platform for that. They also developed a lot of tools. So just, again, some other food for thought to complete WAFA.
Those are really excellent points. Thank you very much. is there one more point that we can take from the floor? Yes.
Yes, thank you. And my name is Osman Damba. I'm the Secretary General of the Ghana Commission for UNESCO. And for me, I'm an agricultural economist. And I've published extensively in the climate change space. But then, moving from academia to the UNESCO space, I've realized that it's all about innovation. I mean, the cultural space is broad. It's about how creative you are to merge what you are doing with culture. It cuts across the food culture, the music culture, and all that. It's about creativity. When you package your product very well, I think you receive the required funding from whichever agency you are looking for. And as you earlier on indicated, people are looking for quick returns on investment. That is somebody's sweat. It's a huge opportunity cost shifting from one funding opportunity to another. And so you require returns on investment. And so when you are creative and innovative about what you are doing in terms of culture, then you attract the required funding. The discussion sometimes looks complex because when you sit in the room and you want to contextualize what you are doing, then it becomes complex. But when you get to the ground and you observe what is going on and see how you can fit in with what you are doing in terms of agric, in terms of health, in terms of even culture on its own, then you can actually attract the required funding. And of course, I mean, coming from a development bank perspective, surely people are looking for what will yield dividends. And culture is a huge space that can yield the required dividends. If you come to Ghana, we have about 21 forts and castles. The economies built around these forts and castles has actually given jobs and a required income to people who initially thought they were jobless. They found creativity around these forts and castles, and they are making returns on investment. And private banks are actually chasing them and building products around these facilities. I'm just saying that innovation will drive the process, and then we can get the required funding opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And we've overrun. So we have not solved all the problems on our list today, but I would like to congratulate, and I would like you to join me in congratulating the panel for such a good start, and also to congratulate, please, yourselves. So we can go out and continue to talk, to network, to listen respectfully, as we have done, to innovate, to create, and see where we get to in our mission to save the world. Thank you very much to you all.